Grace didn't sleep that night. She sat in Chizzy's room, the letter still open beside her, the photo resting on her lap. Her eyes were red and swollen, but not from sadness alone. She was unraveling. Years of silence, of questions buried so deep they had begun to rot inside her, now spilling into the open. Across the room, Chizzy watched her like a sister would. Quiet, patient, ready. She has to know, Grace finally said, her voice hoarse. Who? Chizzy asked gently, though she already knew. Grace's hand trembled as she picked up the photo again. Madam Evelyn. If she wrote this, if she's the one, then she needs to look me in the eye and say it. Chizzy nodded slowly. So what will you do? Grace blinked. I'm going back. The next morning, Grace stood in front of Evelyn and Co. once more. This time she wasn't wearing a uniform. No apron. No tray. Just herself. Raw, uncertain, but not small. Not anymore. She walked through the lobby. The same receptionist from weeks ago looked up and blinked fast. Grace? She whispered like she was seeing a ghost. I need to see Madam Evelyn, Grace said, her voice low but clear. The woman hesitated. She's in a meeting. She'll want to see me. Tell her it's about Hope Springs. And about a letter. That did it. Moments later, Grace was ushered through the grand hallway into Evelyn's office. The same room where she had once stood like a maid, hands behind her back. Now she stood in the middle of the office, staring at the woman behind the desk. Evelyn looked up. Her perfectly lined eyes froze. Grace. The room was silent. Grace took a breath, then pulled the yellowed envelope from her bag and placed it on the desk. Evelyn didn't touch it. What is this? She asked, her voice steady, but her hands weren't. A letter, Grace said. From a woman who says she had a daughter. A daughter she lost. A daughter named Grace. Evelyn's breath hitched just slightly. I found it yesterday, Grace continued. At the orphanage. Along with this. She laid the photo beside the envelope. It was Evelyn holding a baby. Evelyn stared at it. Color drained from her face. Grace, where did you? Is it you? Grace asked, voice barely above a whisper. Did you write this? Evelyn's lips parted. No words came. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't blink. Grace's voice cracked. Just tell me. Yes or no? A long silence. Then Evelyn finally exhaled. Yes. Grace's knees nearly gave out again. She caught herself on the edge of the desk. Why? She choked. Why did you leave me there? Why didn't you come back? Tears slipped from Evelyn's eyes. Not silent ones. Not elegant ones. The kind that cracked through her carefully kept shell. I was 18, she whispered. I was the daughter of a politician being groomed for a marriage I didn't choose. I was pregnant by someone I wasn't supposed to love. They threatened to destroy him if I didn't give you up. They made me sign forms. I never even held you after the birth. The photo. It was taken in secret, the only moment I had before they took you away. Grace's hand covered her mouth. I tried to find you, Evelyn continued. I went back to the orphanage years later, but by then, your records were lost. They told me you'd been adopted. That there was nothing more they could tell me. I kept searching, but I gave up. Then why didn't you recognize me when I worked for you? Grace demanded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Evelyn looked shattered. Because I wasn't looking for a maid. I was looking for a ghost. And by the time I started to suspect, you were already gone again. They both fell silent. Then Grace asked, almost childlike, did you ever love me? Even before you knew me? Evelyn stood up, rounded the desk slowly and knelt in front of her. The woman who once ordered her to clean champagne off the floor, now bowed like a mother. I loved you every day, she said. Even when I didn't know your name. Grace cried then. Not the quiet, careful tears of before, but the deep sobs that shook her whole body. And Evelyn held her. That evening, Grace sat with Chizzy and Keen back at the house, staring at her phone. Ken had called again. Twice. She hadn't answered. Chizzy nudged her. You know you have to talk to him, right? Grace didn't reply. So Keen, who rarely said much, leaned forward. You left that house because of pain. But maybe, you're being called back by something real. Grace finally picked up the phone and called. Ken answered immediately. I was just about to call you, he said softly. Grace's voice wavered. I met her. You didn't need to ask who. He just stayed quiet. She was young, Grace whispered. Scared. But she didn't forget me. I'm glad you know now, Ken said. There was a pause. Then he asked gently, does this change anything between us? Grace was quiet. Then she said, I think it changes everything. But maybe that's not a bad thing. He smiled on the other end. Then maybe we can start again. From the beginning. Grace looked out the window, watching the stars blink into the night sky. Maybe, she said, voice softer now. But only if you promise one thing. Anything. No more running. He didn't hesitate. I promise. And for the first time in a long, long while, Grace believed him. The next morning, Grace woke up before the sun. There was no alarm. No noise. Just a quiet stillness that pulled her from sleep like a whisper in her chest. For the first time in years, the ache behind her ribs felt lighter. Not gone but no longer unbearable. She sat by the window in Chizzy's room, her legs tucked under her, watching the soft gold of morning slowly warm the sky. A mug of ginger tea sat beside her, untouched. Chizzy stirred on the bed. You're up early. You okay? Pause. Then Grace smiled faintly. I think I might be. Later that day, Grace stood outside the gates of Evelyn & Co. again. This time she wasn't there for confrontation. She was there for closure. And maybe a new beginning. Evelyn had called earlier that morning, asking if Grace would come for lunch. The invitation had sat in Grace's chest like a stone. Heavy. Terrifying. But necessary. A driver met her at the gate. Not one of the old, cold men in suits. This one smiled, opened the door like she mattered. When Grace entered the estate, Evelyn wasn't behind a desk or at some grand marble table. She was waiting at the garden gazebo, wearing a soft linen dress, no makeup, her hair gently pinned back. She looked human. Hi, Evelyn said. Grace nodded. Hi. They sat. No silver cutlery. Just a simple meal Evelyn had ordered herself. Comfort food. Food with memory. I hope this isn't too much, Evelyn said gently, offering her a plate. It's okay, Grace replied. I'm still trying to understand how to be in this. Me too. They ate in silence for a while. Then Evelyn reached into a small wooden box and pulled out something wrapped in old lace. I wanted to give you this, she said. I kept it all these years. Grace unfolded it carefully and gasped. It was a tiny bracelet. Pink beads, worn but intact. The kind given to newborns in the hospital. Her name was on it. Grace touched the beads like they might disappear. Why, Grace? Because I had none left, Evelyn whispered. And you were the only thing that felt like hope. Grace blinked fast, swallowing a lump. I don't know how to fit you into my life yet. Evelyn nodded. Then let me earn my place. One step at a time. Later that evening, Grace walked home with a paper bag of leftovers Evelyn had packed herself. Chizzy and Keen were on the porch when she returned. She fed you. Chizzy grinned. You're one of us now. Grace laughed. A real laugh, full and surprising. She made me take Plantain home. Can you believe? Keen smirked. Next thing she'll be asking for your stew recipe. They all laughed. Then Chizzy's eyes softened. Did it help? Grace nodded. It didn't fix everything. But it filled something. That night she texted Ken. Grace, can we meet tomorrow? I want to start again. Properly this time. He replied within seconds. Ken, name the time and place. I'll be there. The next day, Grace stood in front of the same cafe where they had once had an awkward first conversation, where Ken had offered her tea she never finished. Now he stood at the same table, but this time he was holding 2 cups. Ginger tea, he said, handing one to her. With honey. She smiled. You remembered. I remember everything about you. They sat, and this time no walls were up. No fear hiding behind every word. They talked about everything. About her meeting with Evelyn. About his family. About how he'd started therapy to deal with the pain of losing his father. And then Grace said something she hadn't expected to say. I want to go back to school. Ken blinked. Really? She nodded. I never got the chance. But I want to study social work. Help kids like me. He grinned, eyes shining. That's perfect. She smiled. I want to make something of myself. Not just for me, but for that little girl they left behind. She deserves a better ending. Ken reached across the table and took her hand. You're already writing it, he said. And it's beautiful. Weeks passed. Grace enrolled in a weekend program with Evelyn's help. Not because Evelyn forced her way in, but because she offered gently and Grace accepted. She started volunteering at Hope Springs Orphanage, reading to the younger girls in the afternoons, brushing their hair, listening to their stories like someone once should have listened to hers. Ken came to pick her up after class every Saturday. He waited patiently, always with that same cup of ginger tea. Chizzy and Keen were still her home base, her anchors. On Sundays they had movie night with burnt popcorn and old TV dramas. Grace always picked the corny romantic ones now. Chizzy teased her, but she didn't stop. Because healing, Grace had learned, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the quiet tea, the shared rice, the silent hug. Sometimes it's simply in choosing to stay. And so Grace stayed. She stayed in her story, in her healing, in her hope. And for the first time ever, she wasn't just surviving. She was becoming. A week later, Grace sat on the edge of Evelyn's garden bench, watching butterflies flutter over marigolds. She was calmer now, more grounded. But one question still tugged at her, quietly, persistently. She hadn't asked it. Not yet. Across from her, Evelyn poured iced zobo into 2 glasses. She'd invited Grace for another lunch. This one felt easier. Like they were slowly getting to know each other, not just as mother and daughter, but as 2 women who had both survived. "Can I ask you something?" Grace said suddenly. Evelyn looked up. "Of course." Grace hesitated. Then, is he your son?" The question floated there, heavy and sharp. Evelyn blinked. "Pie's son. I mean, everyone thinks so. When I was working here, people treated him like someone important. Like family. And I thought, if he's your son," her voice faltered, "what does that make us?" Evelyn stared at her for a long time. Then she exhaled. "Oh, Grace. I should have told you earlier." She shook her head, almost laughing softly at herself. "Ken is not my son." Grace blinked. "He's not." "No. His full name is Kenneth Obiora. His mother, Clara, was my best friend in university. We started this company together after school. She died of cancer when Ken was 16. I promised her I would look after him, help him find his path." Evelyn's eyes softened. "So I took him in. Not as a son, but as the godson I promised to love like one." Grace's breath released in relief. "So, we're not related." "Not even a little," Evelyn said gently. "And if I had known how close you 2 were becoming, I would have told you sooner. I never wanted you to carry that kind of fear." Grace covered her face, half laughing, half crying. "Thank God. Chizzy and Keen even did the math. We were all panicking." Evelyn chuckled. "Then let them know they can sleep easy tonight." Grace smiled. But beneath that smile was something deeper, a peace she hadn't felt in weeks. The last thread of confusion was gone. Her past was no longer tangled in shadows. And her future? It was beginning to make sense. Grace smiled. But beneath that smile was something deeper, a peace she hadn't felt in weeks. The last thread of confusion was gone. Her past was no longer tangled in shadows. And her future? It was beginning to make sense. That same evening, Grace walked slowly back to Chizzy's house. Her steps felt lighter, her chest less tight. Chizzy opened the door before she even knocked. "So?" Chizzy asked, grabbing her hand. "Don't tell me you didn't ask." Grace laughed. "I did. And?" She said Ken isn't her son. His mother was her best friend. Evelyn just raised him like a godson after she passed. Chizzy threw her hands in the air. "Ah, hallelujah. Somebody bring drum." Keen came running from the kitchen. "So we're free to ship them again? Can we call him your future baby daddy now?" Grace laughed. "You people are mad." But her laughter was real, and for once she didn't try to hide it. 2 days later, Ken showed up outside the gate in his car, holding a small sunflower in one hand and a shy smile in the other. "I owe you a proper explanation," he said. "No," Grace replied, "you owe me lunch." He grinned. "Deal." They didn't go to a fancy place. Just a quiet corner spot with grilled fish and soft music. They talked. About Clara, about Evelyn, about how he always tried to protect Grace from Evelyn's temper without overstepping. "You changed me," he said softly, "in ways I never knew I needed." Grace looked at him and smiled. Maybe we both needed each other. 6 months later. It was supposed to be a simple dinner. Just them and Evelyn and a few close friends. Grace didn't expect anything more. But when the waiter brought her dessert, there was no cake on the plate. Only a velvet box. She froze. Ken knelt beside her chair, heart in his eyes. I don't have a perfect past, he said, but I want a future with you. Will you be my peace? My partner? My wife? Grace covered her mouth, tears spilling before she even nodded. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. Evelyn clapped from across the table, crying as if she were the one being proposed to. Chizzy screamed. Keen fainted dramatically. The whole restaurant clapped. And Grace? She laughed through her tears. Felt like God was rewriting her story in real time. Their wedding. It wasn't extravagant. It was beautiful. A small garden ceremony with marigolds blooming everywhere, just like Evelyn's garden. When she walked down the aisle, she didn't feel like a girl who ran from an orphanage. She felt like a woman walking into everything she once thought she'd never have. Ken waited with trembling hands and a smile that wouldn't leave his face. They said their vows beneath a tree Evelyn planted the year Grace came to her house. And when the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted. 1 year later. In a sunlit room filled with soft lullabies and baby powder, Grace rocked a tiny bundle in her arms. A baby girl. Skin soft as velvet. Eyes as bright as the morning. They named her Amara, meaning grace and gift. She's got your eyes, Ken whispered, kissing his wife's forehead. She has your nose, Grace teased, cradling the child. Evelyn stood nearby, smiling like her heart was finally full. She'll know everything, Grace promised. Her story. My story. Our story. No shame. No secrets. Ken nodded. Just love. And in that quiet, sacred moment, Grace realized. She didn't just survive. She had built something beautiful from everything that once broke her.